Big Ten championship time. I'm going to predict the picks here. I'm going to give you our conference winner. I think the East is a three-team race, by the way. When I look at the Big Ten this year, I don't think it's Ohio State, Michigan, and everyone else. I know why people say that. I don't see it that way. And, I don't like to look in the rearview mirror a lot. So when I'm looking at 2023, I really care about what I think is going to happen in 2023. I've got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State in my top 8. I think the AP does as well, or at the very least, they got them way up there. There's a lot of talk about gaps. And I think there is a gap. I just think it's behind those top 3 teams in the East. I look at the Ohio State and Michigan view right now, and even within those 2 teams, folks are talking about a gap. There's Michigan and there's a gap. And I appreciate what people are trying to say when they traffic in that sort of thing. There was a gap between the 2 teams on the field last year when they played and the year before. In terms of program strength, there's not a gap between anyone in Ohio State in the Big Ten. You've just gotten the better of them 2 years in a row. Hey, I watched that same Buckeye team get to within a whisker of beating Georgia and going to the national championship where they would have won it last year. There's not a gap. You've just beaten them 2 years in a row, which is really all it's about. I don't know why we get involved in what I call the gap scheme so frequently. But Penn State's there. That's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing I want to tell you is, what does the Tier 2 in this conference look like? The entire Big Ten West is just up for grabs. And this is the last year that we're going to have this thing. I've just got a Post-it stuck to my index finger here, what we call a McGrady special around the office. Ryan McGrady is our crack stats and info guru. He says every year since 2016, Iowa has held opponents under 20 points per game. And what have they had to show for it? A very limited result because they can't score to save their lives. Maybe that changes this year. Hey, maybe P.J. Fleck in Minnesota finally back up what they mean when they say it just takes a little something different to play here. Wisconsin's the preseason favorite in the West, and Wisconsin's got newness everywhere, up to and including OC and head coach and quarterback. I am totally fascinated with what Maryland can do. Maryland is a prisoner of a division for one more year. Otherwise, they'd probably rightly be viewed as a contender in the West. Also, Michigan State loses Peyton Thorne. They lose Keon Coleman. And yet I'm sitting there across from Mel Tucker a month ago up in Indianapolis, and he looks me in my eye and tells me, we've got the most talent we've ever had on this team since I've been here. What does that equate to? It equates to a complete jumbled mess, in my estimation, in the Big Ten West. But we got to pick a winner, right? Yes, we'll do it in just a second. What about sleepers in this conference? You know I love Illinois. Illinois' got Luke Altmaier at quarterback now. They've got a top 10 preseason defense per the S&P Plus. There is no Michigan on their schedule. There is no Ohio State on their schedule. They got 3 returning wide receivers they like. Pretty good on the offensive line, really good on the defensive line. I think they like the running backs enough, and I think that they got a taste last year. They're kind of like Kansas. They got a taste in that they charged out of the gate. They started what? They started 7-1 last year, and then they finished 8-5. They just didn't have enough gas in the tank. We see teams do that every year. It takes 12 weeks worth of gas, and if you got that tank half full, you get out into the desert, and then you're stranded in the desert. Illinois got stranded a little bit last year. Well, that means you got the best of both worlds. You got to experience the highs, but then you get to sell your team and motivate your team based on the lows at the end of the year. So I'd watch out for them. What does the conference championship picture look like in the Big Ten? Well, I deliberated on this for like a month and a half, but I'll tell you where I'm going. It's where I thought I was going to go in the spring. I'm taking Ohio State over Iowa, of all teams, to win the Big Ten. So I like Ohio State to come out of the East. Full disclosure, I don't think any of those teams over there in the top 3 is losing more than one game. So it is Ohio State, but it's Ohio State by a thin margin. But Iowa over there, like Iowa, if Cade McNamara is able to play, and it looks like he was good to go as of this past weekend, Eichel and the guys over there at our Iowa site seem to believe not nearly as big an issue as the injury situation has been made out to be. So, look, if Iowa improves moderately to mildly offensively, they're going to be a really tough team, really tough out over there. But Ohio State, to me, is the combination of an elite roster without an elite quarterback that's known since the spring. They have to play complementary football to win. There's no C.J. Stroud to lean on. I think a lot of people view that as a negative. I have viewed it and will continue to view it as a potential positive. The difference is they may not strike you with lightning here, lightning there. It may look totally different, and that's fine because they got the players to play that way. Your team may not. Ohio State's got the players to play that way. And here's the sentence that I'm going to finish with that I have not said, I think, to any point under Ryan Day's tenure there. Their defense may well be the MVP of this team this season. And if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, I think it'll be just as much because of Jim Knowles in the second year, not third, second year as DC up there, and the way that defense plays, especially up front, as anything that offense does. That's complementary football. You know, once upon a time, that's the way they won games in this sport, and it could be that way again. You give me Ohio State over Iowa. That's how I see the Big Ten this year. Their current over-under in Vegas is 10.5 wins. They are plus 165 odds-on favorites to win the Big Ten. Now, before we move on here, I want to tell you what I just said, because when we put out the JP poll the other day and I had Ohio State above Michigan, people said, that's crazy. And I try to remind you, all that is a power rating. So all the JP poll is neutral field favorability. Who would I favor over who, or whomst would I favor over whomst on a neutral field tomorrow? People said, well, there's no way that Michigan should be behind Ohio State. And guys, I need to remind you of something. Michigan gets Ohio State at home this year, and they're still not favored to win the Big Ten. I know that doesn't mean anything to you because that's been the case the last 2 years, and you thumped them. I know that. You don't have to tell me that. That's all I'm trying to do with my power ratings, though. That's it. And so right now, Ohio State's about a 1 to a 1.5 point dog in that game, which implies neutral field they'd be favored. That's it. There's no gap. There's no anything. It's razor thin. You could barely fit this piece of paper perceptionally between where those two teams stand. But that's the whole point. There is no big gap there. So I'm taking Ohio State over Iowa in the Big Ten. Consequential year and final year for divisions up in the Big Ten.